Jill, you're good for us to go?
Yep.
Okay. We have an agenda. Are there any changes, additions, subtractions by staff or members? No? If not, a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Perfect. We have minutes from June 26th. Clara, are there any, based on those comments, is there anything we need to talk about in the minutes, or we think we're fine on the minutes?
We had a member of the public reach out saying that they didn't think that we discussed the size of window signage at the last meeting, which I guess I addressed in the minutes as something that we did discuss. So possibly that was the meeting before where we talked about restricting to 1/3 of the window size, but I really thought it was last meeting. So if you'd like to strike that from the minutes, we can. If you'd like to leave it.
What part of the minutes? I read these, but I'm just trying to figure out where they are. That is now.
I
It's
remember
under 5A.
discussing that, but I don't remember.
Clara, 5A.
I don't have them in front of me.
I remember discussing them too. So,
Page 2 of 3,
yep.
middle paragraph.
So what it reads right now is temporary and seasonal signage will have special rules. Window signage will be on the inside of the window, and the signage should not be more than 1/3 of the surface area of the window to which it is affixed to. There was some discussion, and members overall agreed not to restrict the size of window signs. And I think we talked about that, and then we kind of circled back to it after you had left, Nate, because you left a little early, I think, last time, is my vague memory of it. Are we comfortable with how the minutes read?
That's what I remember too.
Okay. So we're comfortable with the minutes as they are? Okay, then a motion, Claire, are you okay with that?
Yep,
Okay,
all good.
then we'll, a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, any other, second?
Second.
Any other discussion on the minutes? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you to Jill and Clara for doing those. We have no public hearings, and it doesn't look like we have any for the end of the month as of right now either, or we don't know.
Funny you should mention that. We did just get an application in this morning, and it looks good that we can get it on the agenda for the 28th. And it would be for a CUP for adult use cannabis, low dose edibles in a B2 zone. So we're gonna aim for the 28th.
And that's going back to the conversation you and I had that our zoning started at B3, basically.
Correct.
And so it would be a conditional use in a B2 zone.
Correct.
Can you let people know where it is so they can think about that in their mind a little bit?
It's for Little Chief. So they've started the licensing process, but with that licensing process, we're saying you also need to ensure that your zoning is correct, hence the conditional use permit. So they just handed in all of their paperwork and made their payment today. So our goal would be to get that into the newspaper to be out on Saturday, I think, Jill, which would then put our 10 days at the 28th.
Okay. So people know B2 is kind of that area. It would also be out the Maurice's area.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other big sections of B2, like is down by Dairyland B2?
Mark, can you comment on?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so just so people have an idea of what we're talking about, is those are kind of the general areas that if we start looking at B2 and conditional uses to keep in the back of our mind, right? Okay, okay, then we'll move on to the sign ordinance update. Hopefully people have had a chance to read the couple of drafts that have come out. Staff has done a good job working on those. How do you want to proceed?
I think if we can do it similarly to last time where we kind of run through changes since our last discussion, because we have, so like planning and zoning staff has continued to discuss. We've also been discussing with our code enforcement officer, and then we've also gotten feedback from actual sign companies, well, a sign company on some information. So things have been added here and there throughout. So I think if we just can run through a red line version, that might be helpful. And then we'll also focus on the table for the residential zones, which got handed out as a hard copy for you today. So, and then we do have kind of a hard stop. The golf board is coming in. They have a meeting at 7:30 tonight, so we just have to be sure to be
Let's hope
hopefully
so.
out of here by then. All right, so nothing has changed on page 1. And again, the formatting of this is not great. So that will get updated at some point. So we've got like big chunks of open space in places, and then some stuff is getting like, what's the word? The drop down. I can't fix that at this point, so I'll have to reformat everything at some point. So just bear with me as we continue going.
Is the version that was in our packet the same as what's in front of us so people know what they reviewed, or are there changes?
This is going to have some changes from that. Nothing hugely significant, just some small like language things, and then some further comments where we want some discussion.
Okay.
So one of the changes that we have made since this draft is including a definition of a banner. We've been getting some more questions about banners, whether or not they count as temporary, what they are, can they be used as permanent signage? The way that we've always treated them essentially is temporary, so we've put in a definition marking it as temporary. Does anybody have any concerns about banners being noted as temporary? The idea behind that is essentially that like a banner is not the same materials that you would use as on a permanent sign. They just are not as long lasting. Hence temporary. This question got raised last time about handheld signage. So we've included some language regarding it, but I don't know that we ever finished the conversation about whether or not we want to prohibit or allow handheld signage. So I thought this would be a good place to maybe finish that discussion. I think we were leaning toward prohibiting, but I just want to be sure about that.
Why would we want to prohibit that?
I don't know.
Is there a line that can be drawn?
Maybe. What
Oh,
kind of line would you
I
like?
don't- Well, that'd be, I think, so I brought it up for that reason as to how out of hand can it get? Has it ever? I don't know if it has or hasn't, but I guess that's why I brought it up. And there was nothing mentioned currently in the ordinances.
What's,
Go ahead, Sarah.
I'm just trying to think of like, you're trying to prohibit people from like protesting or like,
No, I think the idea behind this is for business use only.
okay.
So like if you're.
But like
at
if
your
someone's out
sale-
there like,
Right,
With their arrow to go by carpet or something? Is that kind of what we're trying to get at?
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, I guess what brought it up probably was on where you got Lincoln and Union and you got signs that are in that intersection and there's sidewalks and they're on the sidewalks and they're very public. And if they get in the way of others,
that's more like protesting. That's where people like, I feel like will go down there and
This,
Well, yeah,
have businesses.
sounds like the distinction is on premises or off premises.
Yeah.
So if it's on premise, like with the downtown businesses, for example, the sidewalks are public property, right?
yes,
So there's not really too many places the people would have a handheld sign on premise in some ways, because mostly they're gonna be in road right of ways, won't they?
I mean, realistically, probably, yeah.
Okay.
Well, like the fireworks people.
Right, yeah. Oh, by Walmart?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and that could be in a 210 right away for all we know.
Well, not in the parking lot. Though.
Oh, in the parking lot,
Right.
okay, yeah, yeah.
So that would be on premise at a because Walmart's not selling fireworks, so it would be on premise at a different.
Fireworks locations there though,
In the strip mall.
in this- Okay.
or it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, I mean, do people have an appetite for wanting to restrict, not wanting to restrict?
I don't think it should be restricted. personally.
Yeah, I think it's kind of,
Slippery slope.
yeah, I mean, I just don't see why would we restrict it?
Yeah. I don't know.
And that
But-
wasn't even my point, is to restrict, but just that there was nothing in there.
Right,
North
like
Convention.
are we acknowledging it that it's okay, or what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if it does come up as, I'm believe me, I'm not about making more rules and regulations. Really not. I know.
You'll
it
fit
wasn't
in here.
there, so, and I just, when does it become too much? And maybe it never has become too much, so maybe it's never been an issue, but I don't know that. So.
Is the city getting complaints?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean it's never happened.
Right. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, the only concern about leaving it wide open, and kind of goes back to like a garage sale issue, you know, you talk about, I think you've said in the past, garage sales, you can have 4 per year. We know that there's folks that have many more than 4, and they're not enforced. If you leave it wide open, and then all of a sudden you get a summer business, and let's say it's a summer business that, you know, do we want a business where all of a sudden they're advertising each and every weekend and they get sign spinners, and then all of a sudden, and again, a non-issue today, but all of a sudden we get sign spinners every weekend, each and every weekend. Not an issue today, but is an issue in the future. Is it something that we enforce down the road? And so, again, that's the only thing I potentially see, and I say potentially, but not an issue today, but something that do we look at enforcing?
Did you happen to look, and I feel badly asking you and putting you on the spot, but do we know what other towns, like, in my mind, I feel like Conlon's Furniture in Fargo has been going out of business for, I don't know, 9 years, or they always have an inventory reduction sale. And so I'm thinking, like, does Fargo have a rule? But I mean, it just seems like they're always out there when you go up to Fargo.
The language that Wayne had shared was from a city in Texas, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head if they restricted it or if it was simply,
Prohibited.
it was
Was
just
prohibited.
prohibited.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are definitely certain parts of the country that I've been in where it's like you drive down
Yeah.
and like the road is full of sign spinners. I mean, in California, like my brother lived in California in Victorville. I mean, it was like full of. So I there's probably towns where like that's an issue, but like I just don't see it being an issue here. Like,
Okay.
I don't foresee it either, but
Yeah.
I just don't ever want it to be an issue.
Yeah.
And
Most
it-
people in Fergus Falls don't want to draw attention to themselves.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I
Well,
also don't want to.
challenges now driving, you know, I just don't want it to become an issue.
And I also want to be careful, like, I mean, we have plenty of people, like, sports groups that do, like, the car wash fundraiser
Right.
and things like that. And so, like, how do we, that's okay, but, yeah, I mean, like, where do you draw the line?
yeah, because I was thinking about the same thing because they're going to be happening this week. I mean, this definition says to a business, you know, to attract attention to a business. So I would assume that those
Are commercial then,
Those
right?
would
Or
al-
non-commercial, right?
are non-commercial, so those would be permitted. But then it's like, well, why? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's an issue. I guess
No,
I'm not for
yeah.
making rules for non-issues, but
Right.
Agreed,
I don't know.
I just don't want to, I don't want to prohibit anything that we have in place. I just don't want to leave it open for any interpretation to the future, you know, I mean, I don't want it to become the going out of business for 9 years, you know, that's the thing I see. But then again, I
That's a
don't
hype-
foresee that happening in this community either.
It's a hypothetical situation. I mean, not necessarily.
Yeah, we can't put a safety net around the world either.
Right. I'm not supportive of creating rules and restrictions for hypothetical situations. Or really limiting a business to do what they feel is beneficial to their business, so.
If it becomes a public safety issue,
Yeah.
the police will get involved. You know what I mean? Like, at that point, then it's a public safety issue and it
Right.
can be addressed by the police,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
Probably.
don't know if we've ever had anything like that,
Right.
at least in the recent future. that
Right.
It
No.
would
But like, is
be
a
worth our time discussing.
sign spinner more distracting than like an electronic
No, not
billboard that, you know, is constantly rotating? Like,
Or your cell phone that you're
yeah,
texting
I just
on.
don't.
Yeah, that's more scary.
Good call.
I do agree with Wayne that we didn't have anything in code addressing it at all before, so I do like having at least the definition.
Yeah.
So that people can look at it and say, okay, this is something that, you know, my business could take advantage of. I could bring in a sign spinner if I wanted to.
And the only thing that I guess that I'm probably the most, if we were to do some restriction, it would be the perpetual use, I mean, of, maybe that gets at, you know, if that's part of your everyday business to do that, I mean, I would be okay maybe saying,
30-day or something like that.
yeah, or something along, or just it can't be a perpetual ongoing situation.
Like tax preparers, you'll see them use them
Yeah,
during tax
certain
season.
time of the year, whatever.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we live in a climate too that will
Who
probably
would want to?
take
Right.
Yeah,
take a
yeah.
Well, so do we tie handheld signage then to our temporary and seasonal signage section and say you can get a permit to either have it, you know, have a sign for 30 days, or to tie it to tax season, you have a sign for, you know, 4 months?
In my mind, you don't even need a permit for it, but that's just me. I feel like we're gonna be permitting everything.
Okay, so we can put it.
Sorry,
under-
Clara, I don't mean to shut that down,
Is
but
that
No,
the
no, no.
on or off premises distinction that the
Well,
permitting
maybe,
comes into
yeah.
play if you're on, because when it does become an issue, it'll be, you think, well, we'll just address it at that time. It's not gonna be possible, because it'll be targeting that one business that's having someone on Union interrupting flow and that sort of thing.
yeah.
That's my thought.
To
I
go
mean-
back to my original concern, I think you guys have addressed it. I'm done. I mean, I think it's,
Just leave it out.
leave it out.
Okay.
So then don't even mention it at all then, would,
So remove even the definition, or leave a definition.
There's
And
nothing
it's under
applicable in the code being
exemptions.
talked about it. Well, I guess you would leave it under the exemption, or you remove it altogether. What is the group's? In some ways, if you leave it out altogether, if it becomes an issue and a public safety thing, there's probably more latitude for addressing it from that perspective than if we say it's allowed.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
You've got a line for temporary signs, 7 guidelines G. It says the city must grant permission, but no permit required to install a banner. You could have this the same way. If someone wanted to do that and they were to request permission, but you didn't have to permit it, they would answer your question about permitting. If there was some obvious concern about it, the city could say, listen, we've already got 3 on that block, you know, maybe now's not the right time, and there'd be a conversation about it, denying permission perhaps, but not quite getting into the whole package of writing new rules.
So we've also had the discussion with
if
the
we're gonna-
administrator's office about removing the necessity to ask for permission for a banner.
Right, and that was gonna come up tonight, because there's just the reality of, you know, there's a VBS banner here and you know,
Well, it's
Yeah.
like, what are the guidelines for granting permission? It's like if you grant permission for one, you kind of
you gotta do them all. And how do
It's
you,
like just an administrative.
And I expected that that would come up, and so I thought this would be a
Yeah.
good time.
I mean, I think the discussion last time had kind of been around,
You're always one step ahead.
these groups aren't even gonna know, especially these nonprofits, that they have to get permission. I mean, if someone at church says, okay, can you put this in your yard for Vacation Bible School? That homeowner's not gonna go, let me call City Hall. I mean, that's the reality
But
of
we
it.
don't allow those signs to be placed in right away, right?
Right, no, not in right of ways.
Okay, so if this falls underneath the temporary signage, they're not allowed in the right of way anyway.
Well, garage sale ones were gonna be allowed, right? In the right of way? Isn't that how that all landed?
Not according to the history that I've seen from city council, so
Okay.
city code still says no signs in right of way.
Right, but we were gonna clean that up because it wasn't being enforced. Wasn't that the talk at the last meeting with the 2 council members that were here?
That's not
We didn't,
necessarily true that it's not enforced.
yeah, and we didn't, I don't think we made a permanent decision on what direction we
Okay.
wanted to go. We
It
heard
was
what had
discussed,
happened with
right.
council in the past.
Right.
And I had Lynn pull some minutes and discussions from that time. It was 2015. And there was no resolution passed and code was not changed. So it was essentially just a discussion at a council meeting that doesn't have any enforceability at this point.
I guess I'm fine leaving the temporary, just leaving it out. personally, but what does the group want to do for the handheld? I mean, I can
It
go either
hasn't
way.
been in there ever since the inception of. So I have no problem with that. And I brought up safety last time, and you had brought that up now, and that'd be the only thing that I could see if it was put in there, and just kind of leave it a caveat as if it is deemed not safe by, see, but that's the thing, who's gonna tell you it's not safe? I don't know what the answer is, but.
Right. That, yeah. Unless they're like swinging it at people, the police are probably not gonna have much to say.
I guess can't it always be addressed then if it ever does get to that point and not be in here? And then address it as issues come up later,
If they ever do.
if they ever do, yeah. So,
So remove it from even the definitions, is what I'm hearing. Okay.
the other thing is if you put it in here and then everybody reads this and they go, oh, I can have held signs up. So then everybody's doing handheld signs.
I mean, people probably think that they can anyways, right?
That's my gut.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why that's my gut, but that's my gut.
That's
I mean, the reality is people can't find employees to hire, so I'm guessing they're probably not easy to come by to get people to stand outside with a sign.
That's probably true. Okay. All right, good discussion. We will remove handheld signage. And where's my notes? Okay. Menu board signs. I don't remember if we had this discussion last time or not.
No.
Okay, so this has come up since. This was a discussion we had with the building official when somebody comes into town and starts a new drive-through restaurant, say, like think about a Taco Bell. They have menu board signs that you drive past to make your order. And the way that we've always kind of done that is not considering them under sign code, and so the recommendation from staff is to continue to exempt them. So we would just consider them part of the operation of the business. And we wouldn't say, oh, you can only have a sign that's this big by this big, because a lot of them are coming in with corporate rules and whatnot, so.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Everyone think that's reasonable?
But we wanted to get a definition in and then list them under exemptions so that it was clear, because that was the question that came in from somebody who's interested is, what do I don't see that this is listed in your sign code. Who do I talk to about this option?
Does it also include then the car side pickup signs? Are those excluded? Because there's a lot of businesses now that, are doing things for car side pickup.
That's a good question. We hadn't considered that, because most of the time these signs are, there's electrical
Right,
and very
right.
serious footings involved with it. Whereas a lot of times with the car side pickup, those are just temporary signs.
So parking lot signs, like, that would include those, that's a non-issue here. If people, I mean, obviously handicap, that's
Oh.
88, like, things like that. But like, things that have like the business name and car side pickup or anything like that,
Oh,
is that excluded?
I
yeah,
see.
man, it's like the directional signs in any parking area necessary
Right.
for orderly movement of traffic and not being.
To me,
used
that
for
would
advertising.
fit there, right?
Yes, I would
Okay.
say that would fit. And if they're putting it on the building, like if they're gonna have a spot on the building, then we would just consider it part of the overall signage.
As it was
on the
under
building.
3 square feet. or
Right,
whatever.
yeah, because it's small.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, good question. All right, I took a crack at a definition of unsightly and added it to our definitions. So, thoughts? Do you want me to read it out loud, or are you good?
I mean, I think as long as our purpose and intent of this ordinance is read together with what accepted community standards are, I'm probably okay with it.
what are generally accepted community standards?
That's why I said that.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to like,
I mean, you're
that's
right.
what I'm trying to get
That's
at,
the
is just like, it's not bad wording, I just don't know what it means.
Well, okay, so
Um,
I'm not sure how we would define that, I guess, because we don't have a definition of community standards anywhere.
Right.
I'm leaning more towards just referring to the purpose intent of this ordinance, because I think we can anchor a lot of our positions into that.
Okay,
And the
I
other,
think you could just
just stop it before
stop the
that.
definition right after, or thing, as determined in the discretion by the code enforcement officer, period. Then it gives the discretion to whoever's enforcing it to decide whether it's unsightly or not.
I don't even know, do we even need to put the discretion in there, or think determined by the code enforcement officer?
Yeah, I think you
period?
can just leave it,
Don't even put discretion in there.
yeah.
where does it say discretion? Okay.
No,
I would
sorry.
just, I would just do, I
accidentally
think
added that
determined
word.
by the code enforcement officer, period.
I think you could just stop it there.
All right.
Did we touch on last time about if the signage if what is on the sign is not accurate, you have so many days to remove it? If you're like paint the sign black, or, the business is closed, that kind of a situation.
We discussed that briefly today. And what was with the code enforcement officer? Because she asked a similar question about like, well, if the business is gone, do we say anything about that? We don't have anything in there currently about, like, if the business is not here, you remove the sign. Because the concern was that somebody would have a big pylon sign, and that would be very costly to remove or do something differently with. However,
Yeah, I don't think removing it, I think just, if there's a way to paint it or make it a blank, that would be better than, I don't think we have to make people remove thousands of dollars worth of value of signs. Because, really removing a sign, that will change their property value for a commercial structure.
Cause the next owner might come in and.
Yeah, want that
pylon.
sign, right, yeah.
But from a business standpoint, the structure itself, when you're driving through town, for a non-resident to see a structure with a wrong business it's not appealing.
Right. To me, if the sign, you have to get the words off the sign. I like either make it a site, like a non-unsightly, like a decent looking solid color, or something, a blank something. And I'm not picking on any business, but I just I drive by Dan Solonback, and you would think just driving by that there's still Dan Solonback.
You do have some verbiage in here. It says, when a building loses its non-conforming status, all signs devoted to the structure shall be removed, and all signs painted directly on the structure shall be repainted in the neutral color or a color which harmonize with the structure.
But that's for
That's-
non-conforming,
yeah,
right?
that's-
Right, but could you essentially apply that same verbiage to this situation?
probably.
Or something similar to it.
Where do we want to put this?
To me, it goes with unsightly, because if it's not, I guess maybe we call it unsightly / inaccurate. Unsightly or inaccurate signs,
Or misleading.
or misleading, right, yeah. Misleading is a good word.
Okay.
And throw one other thing into your mix.
Yeah.
How about whether the light bulbs work or not?
That is in there somewhere. That's what I'm trying to find right now. I thought the word maintenance was part of it, but.
But
Jill
could
or
a
Mark,
person
do you remember
choose to
where
have
this
an,
section was?
can we hire a light if they choose to not have it lit? You can have an unlit sign too. If you just want an unlit sign, I don't know that you can require the working light bulbs.
No, but if you have light bulbs already and one of them's burned out, we could say, hey, your light bulb's burned out. Fix that, please.
Right, yeah.
Oh, what section was this in? Maintain.
I think I just found it under 154, 189. I, page 16.
Well, that's temporary signs, but that's
That's the
decently.
language.
That's different, yeah.
Okay, so this language from I, signs must be kept in good repair and proper state of maintenance. And then Nate, sorry, where was that language that you found? Non-conforming signs.
Non-conforming 6. 154, 190.
Which also, my notes from our last meeting said that we were gonna remove 6 from non-conforming,
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
but then I reread it again, and then I thought, do we actually wanna remove that?
What page is that one on at this point?
Page 16.
6 is on page 18.
Yeah, I thought we were removing that.
Okay, so we still want to remove that?
I thought that's what we had talked about. Is that what you thought we had talked about?
No, I did remember that, but then I read it again and I thought, do we actually remove that?
I'm fine removing it, I guess, but I don't know, how do others feel?
So essentially what we're saying is that if you have a non-conforming building, you sell your, non-conforming signage on a building, you sell your building and/or business, a new business comes in, we are losing our ability to bring that building into compliance by removing this section. And if we're okay with that, if we say you're non-conforming now, even if it changes ownership, you're still allowed to be non-conforming, that's fine. I just wanted us to be fully aware of the fact that if there was a business that had signage that was non-conforming and we removed this, the next business that could come in would be able to use that same signage or square footage or what have you.
I guess I'm okay with that. I mean, if it's there now.
How are you gonna track that in the permitting process?
If they change it, they would have to get a permit and then it would have to be conforming, right? Because it says in here, if you alter a sign, then it has to become conforming. Right?
Yes. That's what I'm concerned about though, is this conflicting with
With that.
that?
So when it says permit required on page 7, it says no sign shall be erected, altered, yada, yada, without a permit. So does that mean like someone wants to change names on a door? That's considered a sign? They have to get a permit?
So the way that we have been doing it is if it's simply a face change on a sign, they do not need to get a permit.
See, then I think we need to have this read that.
Which section?
Well, this, I guess the permit required section in general on page 7, just kind of going back to what needs a permit to change things.
I
If
think
it's
it's in
just
the, it should be in the exemptions.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's not.
It's just when it
Oh,
says
yeah, no,
no.
it is.
Okay.
Exemptions, 1, the changing of the display surface on a painted or
Oh,
printed
okay,
sign
I didn't get on
only.
that far on that one. I didn't connect those two. Okay. Just when you read that first sentence, no sign shall be, okay. So if the building sells or just change, I mean, you just have a simple ownership change, then the sign has to change. I don't know. I mean,
It's essentially a way for us to bring things into compliance. So if somebody comes in, buys a business, we can say, and then wants to change some of the signage, we can say, hey, you were non-conforming before, but we do need you to conform now, so can you paint your sign a different size, or put a different sign out front that is conforming? In order for us to issue you a new permit.
I mean, I guess I could see it like if Target went into the Kmart building, let's just say that. That, I mean, it's a whole new business. If someone bought the Viking and it's still gonna be called the Viking, why should they have to get a new sign?
Well,
Do you-
at
And
that
I'm not
point,
saying
they
that that's
wouldn't be-
non-conforming. I just, you know what I mean? Like, it's still the same thing.
And they wouldn't be, at that, if they're just gonna be moving into the business and maintaining the business as it is, they're probably not getting a new sign permit anyway, because they're not changing the sign.
'Cause
But if they
that's
come
what-
to us.
That's what flags it, is when they come to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
not just the change of ownership
Yeah,
that's gonna
because we
flag
can't
it.
keep track of,
That's what I was trying to get at, like, how are you gonna do that?
no. But if they're coming to us and saying, I need a new sign permit, I'm putting up this thing, that's at the point where we say, okay, you need to be conforming.
Right, so then I think we just need to write it so it doesn't look like a change of ownership it needs to become conforming. It's the change of the sign that needs to make it become conforming. It's not that the ownership change triggers it, it's that the sign change
Well, and I don't know
triggers
that we
it.
say that it's
Yeah.
the ownership.
Maybe I just took that from what you were saying, not what it says. Yeah, you might not.
And I guess maybe we need to dive into when a building loses its non-conforming status. What does that,
What triggers that, you mean?
yeah.
Should be when a sign.
I
Instead
guess
of
when
building.
when they're pulling a permit for a new sign, it's gonna be changing its non-conforming status.
Right, but not all signs are on a building, so should it be when a sign loses its non-conforming status?
Oh, instead of the
Suppose
building,
it
yeah.
would be on the building as what we're referring to, like the frontage of it, I suppose. Okay. Surface area.
Is 6 just dealing with signs on buildings? I mean, 4 covers the sign if there's a move to it.
All signs devoted to the structure.
Sign is not conforming to the building, isn't it?
So does that mean signs in the parking lot, signs? Devoted to the structure.
Well, but this 190 is not talking about buildings being conforming or not at all.
No, it's just the sign.
Right.
Okay. So maybe it's okay to just lose this then.
Well, no, I think 6 is just meant to be dealing with signs that are painted on buildings.
Or attached to. I think the point that he made is the significant one, that this is dealing with whether the sign is conforming or not the building. And so it just needs a word change.
To say when a sign instead of when a building loses.
And then you maybe want to update this, whether the sign is placed on, right? I mean, painted, people don't paint signs. So, I mean, it's, where it's located is the important.
Like Toast's sign is painted on though. So
Or
some
if
people
you
are
cover them
still-
both, the building and or sign.
But if it
So-
was a cabinet sign or dimensional lettering or whatever on there, they're not necessarily painted on the brick.
Right,
That's what that sounds like it's describing.
okay.
So when it says, when a sign loses its non-conforming status, kind of back to what Clara was asking, what is gonna make a person say it's non-conforming all of a sudden?
too big.
Right, but what activity triggers it to be non-conforming all of a sudden?
Say they put it up without getting a building permit and the city staff never caught it.
Okay. So this is gonna be changed to when a sign. Why don't you continue? There we go.
Because I guess how I read it is when the sign loses its non-conforming status, basically going back to the first paragraph in that section, we're gonna leave them alone based on our intent unless it's gonna be enlarged or expanded. I mean, that's the intent of that section.
Nor be used as grounds for adding other signs or uses prohibited elsewhere. Okay.
Well, I like the intent of this paragraph, but I just don't. Basically, if you violate 1 through 5, you got to take steps to remove the violating sign. That's what 6 says. Right?
I think so.
So it should
So,
almost not.
so, but violating 1 through 5 doesn't mean that the sign loses its non-conforming status. Or it does. It does.
It would,
Yeah.
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm thinking the wrong way, but to me it
So
would.
should it just be indented back? Like, it's no longer number 6, it's just the conclusion of this section?
That,
I mean, it's the remedy for violating 1 through 5, basically.
And I think we need to call that out. If 1 through 5 are violated,
The sign
the
loses
sign, it's non-conforming
its
status.
non-conforming status, yeah.
I think that makes more sense than it being another bullet that's equal, because the bullet is what I think is
Right.
confusing.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah.
okay. I think I feel better about that then. I won't leave the word remedy, this is just for me while I work through it. Okay.
So if they violate one of those things or asked to change one of those things, let's say a sign that is non-conforming, they want to alter, can they, instead of just losing their non-conforming status, choose to go through a variance or a conditional use process for keeping, I mean, what are their options at that point?
To confirm.
Variance would be based on if they're trying to alter the dimensions
Okay,
of the sign, we could potentially allow that. Conditional use, we would have to have language in there stating in what scenarios a conditional use would be.
so the variance would be the easiest one, and we don't have to write that probably, but it could be looked at if someone wanted to ask for it.
And then
that
it
to
would
me-
just come back in front of you.
Right, to if it's good or not good. I mean, that to me gives someone an option, a legal option to pursue if they want to. Okay,
Yeah, but again, it would be for like the dimensional standards of the sign
Right.
only.
or placement or something
Or
like that.
placement if it's a non-conforming lot, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
I think we've gone down at least 2 rabbit holes and we've survived, so we'll keep going.
Well, let's see, where's a good place to pick up? The permit section, I just updated this further to better match both discussion and then what our actual permit asks for. So to clarify that that there are multiple signatures needed, so it's the applicant and then the business or the property owner. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're not. So just depends on the situation. And then, based on our discussion last time, if the proposed sign is along state trunk highway or interstate highway, we just added the words "if required" to cover if it's required or not. So exemptions is where probably a lot more changes were made, because we really didn't have a lot listed there before, but we needed to have more. So these are the changes.
I had a question on number 6.
Sure.
1 square foot in area seems really small.
Okay, we can change that.
I mean, that's not very big at all, is it?
I have really bad.
Is that 1 square foot only?
Approximately.
Okay. That just seemed a little tiny to me, I guess. I don't know. But maybe it's fine. I just didn't know what size those
For
signs were.
1 square foot, well, it's really,
They're
it's,
12 by 12.
Okay.
yeah,
I just didn't know.
a little
Okay.
bigger than that.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know if that was like realistic, what someone would put up or not. Okay.
Garage sale signs.
I took a leap and I put the language in there.
Is
So-
that's just re-saying what 118 says, which controls garage sale signs?
The only thing I would say on that is if it's a corner lot, I think a person should be able to put one on, you know, or if they have like a driveway off of an alley. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if 1 per yard, if that is necessary or not. I mean, I don't think people are gonna like put 15 up in their
It could
own
be
yard.
1 per front yard, because technically a corner lot,
Right.
you got 2
Two.
front yards.
Is there a reason that we are specifying only 1 sign in the yard?
I mean, I'd be fine not.
Miss my tab back. There we go.
I mean,
This
someone
is
wants to
what
have a
was in-
garage sale and put 15 garage sale signs in their front yard for a weekend. What
So
do we
just-
care?
Yeah, so we just have to remember that we need to update at the same time. We have to go in and update chapter 118 to match what we're doing here.
Yeah, can we just say like garage sale signs as provided by chapter 118 and defer completely to that chapter? And that way there's not a constant
That's
cross-referencing.
Yeah.
that's
Okay,
what I
that's a
have.
good idea.
Say
Good
those
idea.
exact words again.
You could just say C, just what it says on the bottom.
Or you can say like
C. chapter 18,
Garage sale
garage
signs
sales.
which
regulated under chapter 118.
Yeah.
which are, yeah, consistent
Something
with
to
the
that effect.
requirements. I don't know, yeah.
You'll figure it out, Clara.
Okay.
So Nate, to answer your question though, if we have a corner lot with front and front, and then all of a sudden if they're putting the signs out on the boulevard, then it becomes a site or a site issue with the site triangle that we go back to look at for, you know, those types of purposes.
Right. No, I mean, I get the safety component of it, but if it's 1 sign obstructing that or 15 other signs obstructing it, what's the difference?
I guess I just keep going back to the conversation with the 2 council members in which they said, we're not enforcing it. I mean, like, I keep going back to, we're writing it, but they're not enforcing it, and shouldn't it all match?
Yeah, so that's what my thought is with basically this deferring to what chapter 118 says, so that we know garage sale signs are exempt. And whatever that chapter says is just a separate discussion that you can have at any time you want.
Okay, so that's what we're doing here by just referencing back
We're
to
just
118.
deferring to that, yeah.
Okay. 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 So, okay, wait, help my brain further. So if somebody is mad that their neighbor is having 1,000 garage sales a summer, and they call our code enforcement officer and say, your chapter 118 says that they can only have, 4 sales a year, but they're having multiple signs up for sales. I want you to come take their signs down. She would not have to act on that because the signs would be allowed. So then the nuisance itself would be the number of sales.
Right.
Unless, so maybe chapter 18 still has to be or 118 still has to be updated
To match it.
to say how many signs you can have, but that would be, it just seems to me if I'm gonna do a garage sale, I'm gonna look at the garage, if I'm gonna look at an ordinance, it's gonna be the garage sale ordinance, not the sign ordinance.
Does it make sense? I mean, someone else could come to council, get on the council agenda and say, what is the council's take on these garage sale signs? We're trying to write a sign ordinance. We're gonna spend a lot of time going down different rabbit holes on garage sale signs. We know this has been an issue. I mean, it's a hot button issue in this town. What is the direction the council wants us to take that conversation? I mean, to me, we can write it, but based on what we had at our last meeting with 2 council members here, they're gonna shoot it back to us is my fear, and we're gonna be right back starting over. I don't even know that we have to go with language, but just go and say, can we get on the agenda at a committee of the whole meeting or something and just say, we're trying to finalize this. Where are you guys at with enforcing garage sale signs? How often in the public right of way are you just leaving them be? Because what Anthony said last meeting was they told city staff not to spend their time on them.
Right.
So what direction does the council want? Because then we're just not wasting our time.
That's a good idea.
I think it's likely that there'll be questions about other things than just the sign.
And I don't even know that
Other than garage sale
Oh, right.
within the sign ordinance. So when
Yeah.
the time comes to see the council say, we've got a lot of concerns about the garage sale stuff, and that might take all the time, but let's also then talk about any other issues with the sign ordinance in that same conversation. So we don't end up coming back and forth with other.
So essentially just send an entire draft to council.
Well, I don't know that we go with the whole draft. I don't know that
At some
we're as
point,
far
it's
as a
gonna
draft
come to
yet.
us to
Right.
adopt the whole thing anyway.
Well, right, yeah, that's true.
And so if at that point, we start asking questions about garage sale stuff, and the whole thing gets sent back to you because the whole thing has that problem, that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Is if you've got, these specific things in the rough draft of it, not so rough draft.
I'm just trying to avoid it getting huge too soon, too fast. You know what I mean? Before it's finalized here. Do you have a sense of the garage sale thing?
There's 2 things I would say. I agree that it's not being enforced, and I've had it told to me that everybody knows that after 5 on Friday, or even after 2, we're not gonna be picking up anything until 8 o'clock Monday morning, because there isn't someone that's got that assignment, so to speak. No one's gonna go out and do it. So whether it's on the prohibited list or not, the enforcement isn't going to happen, because that is how it's handled now. But I don't know that that means you don't still have it on the books, because there's lots of other things that don't get enforced, lots. And so just to say that because it's not enforced doesn't make it right or wrong, I don't know that that argument is one I'm gonna hold to. I would still probably say, no, we need to define it, and at some point, it might get to be a problem where, okay, we're gonna start to buckle down on this, and we'll hire someone to go out and pick up garage sale signs on Saturday. Are we ready to do that now? I don't know, but if we don't have it written in, now we're having to start that, and that's a big problem, I think. I think it's better to leave the code, and either you choose to enforce it because you're trying to be right and helpful, or not, but still leave it in. That's what my point would be to the rest of the council. They might not agree with me, but that's what I would. I don't know if that's.
And I don't disagree with that. It's just a very different conversation than we had at our last meeting,
Yeah, I don't know what they said, so.
which is,
Well, Anthony had I think a different memory or a different outcome in his memory of what had actually occurred in 2015, based on what Lynn sent me afterward.
so do we just leave it? I think we refer back to the chapter that you said and then not even touch on it in here.
Agreed.
Okay,
Okay, so refer back to 118. So remove from exemptions or just,
no, just put in the exemption, signs as listed as exempt in section 118, or as 118 applies or something?
Garage sale signs, comma, provided that the sign,
It's
complies
consistent.
with chapter 118, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, yeah, and the idea there would just be consistency, so that the one garage sale ordinance, and I have no idea what that ordinance says. So if it has no restriction on where you can put your signs,
there's a lot of
then
restrictions.
there's a gap right now, you know?
Yep.
And maybe that'll be one that we end up circling back and
Right,
dealing
so it's
with.
not to kick the can, it's just for
Right.
the consistency.
Yep, okay, okay.
So, on the exemptions, I think your table on your handout, you know, you don't address a size of sign that is exempt, but on the table of signs that are permitted, there's several references of sign area. So do we need to define what is exempt size-wise before, or are you just referencing them to the table? Is the table all the exemptions?
The table is what's allowed, so the sizes that are there are the sizes that are allowed. And they
Without
wouldn't
a
have-
permit?
Right, I think that's
No.
what we talked about.
They, well, no,
Shouldn't
they
that be
would have,
included in the exemption then? That you
So I didn't
don't
think
need to
residential
be-
signs needed a permit, I thought that's where we landed.
that might be accurate. Yes, are permitted, but you don't have to
Get a
call and
permit.
pay for a
Right, you
permit.
don't have to call and pay or get permission, you just can do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't think we were making residential do anything.
So you allow it if you
Okay.
have, if you find a confusion between whether you have to issue a permit or not by using that, then allowed might be a better word.
Okay.
Right. Because I thought where we landed was residential, no need for permission or a permit if you just follow the rules.
I think that simple word change clarifies that.
Yes, it
Yep,
does.
I do
Thank you.
too.
And actually, since we're looking at this table right now, I took a stab at including temporary signage language and non-commercial signage language, but the better place to address those might be under exemptions. And then I'd also made some comments about the size, like restricting the size of non-commercial or temporary signage. Which, if we're not considering election signs, we're allowed to do throughout the year. If we're considering election signs, we cannot restrict the size of those during an election cycle. That's a state statute.
I don't know, to me, if you're allowing a banner, I think the sign could be a little bigger. To me, sign, I don't know, I mean, if you're allowing a big banner, you should be able to have a sign that's probably bigger than 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet.
Yeah, this is just the size of your average yard sign.
What are you thinking, Nate?
Well, I mean.
I see wheels turning.
Yeah, well, banner is loosely defined, and then it says to be
It's like, I can
securely
tell there's
fastened to a base, so I could print off a 80-foot banner, get 6 sheets of plywood and fasten the banner to my plywood in my front yard, right? I mean, so what's the difference of? I mean, you either gotta put a size on the banner or take the size out of there completely.
Some of this may have also referred back to in a residential district, not everybody hanging something of their liking to their home.
Sure.
That's where I believe the 3 square foot, like with the Maytag sign.
Yep.
So if you don't have something, then they're gonna take it and run with it.
I get that, but my understanding with the Maytag one is that didn't hold up in court, it was decorative, right?
Well, that's what I had thought, but then Ralph's office dug into it, and actually, that case that we thought was referencing signage, in fact, did not reference signage, and he pled guilty. So,
Oh, okay.
it's a very different memory.
So it
than
changed
what-
since we talked this morning.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad that I looked into it because the memory was faulty on that one.
I don't know, I don't like over restricting homeowners, I guess, that I am hesitant. But banner, like you said, could be huge, and then 3 square feet seems really small. I mean, I think the banner business would be booming.
Well, wouldn't the difference be a banner? Because we have language, I think it's 30 days
Temporary.
temporary, where a sign, then that stays up 24/7, 365.
But this has temporary signs too.
It does.
Okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, the larger size election sign, not the massive ones like here's the whole corner of my block size, but like you've got your basic like 1 foot by 3 foot, whatever those just little squares are, and then you've got the next size up. It's maybe this wide, and what size are those election signs that are just one size up?
They can vary quite a lot. 2 foot by 4 foot is pretty common.
Okay,
And the largest ones that you typically see along the higher speed roads are 4 by 8, plywood size
well,
sheds,
in a residential area,
typically.
2 by 4 seems like a reasonable number to me. I mean, that's not a huge sign. I don't know that we need 8-foot signs, but I mean, do we go to like 8 square feet or, something a lot? 2 by 4 is not massive when you consider,
But again, none of this would apply to elections.
right, I get that. I
So
was
we're
just trying
thinking
like
of
for
other
size.
signs for someone
Right.
to put up a
Right.
garage sale, or
Right.
doing lemonade stand.
Right. I mean, if we're allowing a banner, is a 2 by 4 foot sign really that big of a deal?
Do we need a separate section on banners?
I don't know how to write that though either, so.
Because what we've ended up doing, based on further discussion with staff, is actually creating a brand new section on billboards, which we didn't have before. We just had all this language saying, except billboards, also billboards can't be this. So we pulled all of that out and made a separate billboard section. Do we do something similar with banners under temporary signs?
I don't know. I'm not opposed to this. I just wonder if we change the square feet to like 8 square feet.
Are you talking for the temporary or just on a
The temporary and the
residential?
non-commercial. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, so if you changed it to that, wouldn't the Maytag example be out of compliance then?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
probably
just
would
looking
ask
at it, it
questions.
Is
looks,
the Maytag sign
it's
I mean,
bigger than 2 foot by 4 foot. It's bigger than 8 square feet.
do
I'd
we
say
care
it's-
about the I mean, let's just say, for example, if someone has a Maytag emblem on the side because they collect engines, do we care?
No.
That's my gut.
But someone may.
Right.
But then we get, staff will get nuisance calls
About a
that
Maytag.
someone may be offended by, I'm not saying Maytag, a
Right.
particular.
That's,
We can't do anything about offensive stuff. Can't go down
'Cause
that.
that's freedom of speech stuff.
Yeah. But the concern with, say, a Maytag sign, if we're using that example, is that somebody could think that they're running a business from their home repairing Maytag appliances.
Does Maytag even make appliances?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, they do still, okay.
what is the harm in that? I mean, it just seems like it infringes on so many rights as a property owner to not be able to hang your sign on there because somebody thinks it might be a business or somebody's offended because you have, you should only have 2 signs and you have 3 up there. Well, that's their opinion. It's, at the end of the day, the right should go to the property owner, not passerbys.
Right. And I think we're just saying that would be the only reason a nuisance call could potentially come in on something like that. Because
Well, and I mean, at that point, this sounds awful, but they have the right, can't staff just say they have a right to put that on the side of their building? It's decorative?
Right.
which is what the response has been.
Okay. I mean, to me, the sign, someone could decide to paint the side of their building with a mural of a rainbow or a unicorn or whatever, and they have every right to do that.
Correct.
And so how can we nitpick things when that, you know what I mean? Like, if you can have that freedom with your property, shouldn't you be able to put your collection up? I don't know, that's just kind of where my head goes.
So, do we just go back to our exemption section and say, So I had started language. What page is it?
Something to the effect of signs for that are decorative for the property owner. I don't know, decorative signs.
Non-commercial language, just exempt it from basically anywhere. So that would cover your VBS signs, your pretty much anything. Banners probably included.
Right.
If we're
I'm
tying
fine
it
with
back to just simply non-commercial language.
I think you need to call it yard sign slash, or maybe just signage. Because it doesn't have to just be in the yard, it could be on the building.
Well, I think if we just leave it at non-commercial language, that can be whatever a homeowner is envisioning it to be. It could be a Black Lives Matter sign, or it could be a,
Right, as long as it doesn't just have to be a yard one. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm getting at, is it's just not just one on a stake.
right. Yeah, because it would be any kind of non-commercial. Does Maytag count as non-commercial? I guess that's a different argument that maybe an attorney would have to have in a courtroom, but
Non-commercial for the
Hopefully we don't go
purpose
down
of
that
that property.
yeah.
Okay, so this exemptions, the following signs shall not require a permit. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And in our chart, we clarify that these don't require a permit. So I'm just wondering, are we going beyond R1 now, or what's the idea with this?
So with the non-commercial then, is that what you're asking? Would that category just go away in the chart?
Or is there no size restriction at all then?
Right.
Right, that's what you're suggesting? That section would just go out of the chart?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd keep it in the chart if we're talking about 2 by 4 or 3 by 2.5 or whatever. But I mean, I'd keep a size restriction on it.
Keep the size restriction.
That's just my opinion. I don't.
Of which piece, though? So you're telling me I can't have a collectible sign screwed to the side of my garage that's bigger than 8 square feet?
Do you have it on the date the ordinance is passed?
Well, I mean, I know what you're, I think the purpose of this was the yard signs that you stick in, limit those to a certain degree and not have Sanford and Son basically putting up signs all over the place. But I don't necessarily agree with infringing on people's right to determine what is art in their mind. We're already saying we're not going to restrict that. And so, and it's my property. I should be able to put up whatever signs I feel that are valuable to me, make me happy.
Well, do we draw a link or a difference between non-commercial signage and decorative items?
I don't know that you would have to, because if it's simply decorative, like if it's literally, like you said, a unicorn, that doesn't matter to us in our sign ordinance at all. If it's some sort of a message,
See, to me, I don't see an old collectible sign as a message. I see it as a collectible. In my mind, that's just me.
Right, I agree.
right, so we would lump that under non-commercial language, because it's,
Right, but then we go back to the size thing, and I agree with you. Like, if you want to have an old whatever, I mean,
Like, I have a big American flag, big wood American flag on the side of my house. Can't see it from the road. It's in the back, but
flags don't count.
well, it's not a paper. It's like a sign. It's hung on the side. I mean, what is a sign? Does it have words on it? Does it have symbols on it?
Let's look at our definitions.
Yeah.
but I mean, I think that's.
But
a
I mean,
good
if it's
point, though.
non-commercial,
It's non-commercial.
it's non-commercial. It's bigger than what you're saying.
It's bigger than 3 square feet.
It's bigger than 3 square feet.
Well, that's why the question is,
Yeah.
do we just exempt non-commercial and we don't have any sizes associated with it at all? But
Maybe we
maybe
just
some
do
of us want
non-commercial
sizes.
yard signs and banners with a size. If they're on a building, then is it different?
Claire, no, on a home occupation in a residential, that's where I believe we have 3 square feet, so all of a sudden, and I had a call earlier this summer with a gentleman on West Elcott, where all of a sudden, he wanted to advertise his business on the whole side of his garage. So I think that's where the 3 square feet maybe came into play. That for a home occupation, do you want somebody putting a 4x8?
But that's commercial
That's
then.
commercial,
Could we just,
Right?
yeah,
That's commercial.
could we reword it as business use? Because then you take the commercial, well, I have a old Amico sign that would be commercial, but it's not for business purposes.
And the other thing we talked, I think Clara, you and I talked about on the phone that we needed to circle back to is residential districts, and that we're excluding the regulations for nonprofits in residential districts.
Or we wouldn't lump those in as, we would call them non-commercial language.
Right.
Yep.
So we need to make sure that's called out somewhere for the nonprofits and the churches and things.
Well, that would be called out if we're using the word non-commercial.
Okay.
So I'm trying to go to the definition of non-commercial, but it's telling me it doesn't exist? I'm spelling it wrong?
non-commercial speech means dissemination of messages not classified as commercial speech, which include but are not limited to messages concerning political, religious, social, ideological, public service, and informational topics. It's pretty broad.
Very broad.
It's very broad. And then I think the other thing that that had come up at some point is some churches that are on corners wanting more than one sign. And right now, we're only allowing one sign
Right.
for churches.
What's spelled wrong?
Commercial spelled wrong.
Okay, well, that's why it won't work. Thank you. Do we want to say one identification sign per front yard? Like if they're on corner lot?
Or per city, or per side of city right of way? I mean, if you've got a church that has 2 sides of right of way or 3 right of way signs,
Well, let's just use Bethlehem. They've got it on
They
the
have-
south side of their building. And I don't believe anything on the east or the west.
but to me, I mean, it would be logical to allow it anytime there is a way to drive by a nonprofit in a residential area on that road.
Fine with that.
I just think like the Naz has a corner. I mean, like a lot of churches are on corners. We gotta,
Right. No, I like the right of way approach. I think that's good. Be facing per right of way.
Okay, going back to.
what do we wanna do?
non-commercial, What do we want to do about, what do we want to do about this chart in particular?
So is part of the problem we can't tell if we're looking at a decoration versus a sign? I mean, is that like?
Yeah, there's no distinction between
Well, I
the
mean,
two.
I
A
think-
sign is anything
Yeah,
that's,
I mean, there's,
that-
that's,
it's anything, really.
right. And I like the
Kind
no
of.
illumination, I think, go ahead.
A sign conveys a message of some type. A decoration doesn't always convey a message.
No, yeah, but like pursuant to what's written in here, doesn't seem like there's much distinction.
Yeah.
So like, I'm thinking of someone that has a nativity scene in town that has a sign like he is risen or something, and they put a little spotlight on it. We're saying no illuminated signs. Like, does that then become unconforming and you have someone mad that they've lit the sign with a little spotlight in their yard in their Christmas nativity scene?
You could have somebody mad. You could have somebody call and say, this is infringing on my right to go to sleep at night because I can see the light.
Right, I mean, that's just like, I mean, like, how far down this I mean, to me, that, it's a little spotlight. I just know I drive by it and I see it.
I think maybe we should maybe redefine or
Okay.
our definition kind of along the lines that Ryan was going down.
Between like the decorative and the,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So how do, and decorative not restrict at all? Is that where we're feeling?
Is that a private residence? I don't believe
Yeah.
we should.
Yeah. Are we all on the same page if it's decorative on a private residence property?
Well, but what's our definition of decorative?
Well, we don't have one right
Hold
now.
on a second. What about the
We
temp-
might be here till the golf
what
board is here.
what about the temporariness? So a yard sign, for example, it seems like it's different than. I'm struggling with the concept of a decorative yard sign.
Okay.
Seems like that would be just something we're just making up. Like I feel passionate about my cardboard sign that I'm sticking in my yard. But if you have like a sign on your building or a flag type thing, you know, decorative for aesthetic purpose as opposed to a yard sign, which is always temporary, maybe not.
Well, to me, it would always be temporary. 'Cause you have to mow around it, you have to
Right.
do something to maintain around it. Right?
So, I mean, but there are houses in town that have yard signs that they leave up year-round and they simply place them into their garden so that they are not mowing around them and they just stay there.
Like along the lines of like,
All are
Support the-
welcome here, those
Yeah.
type of signs.
Yeah.
See those a lot, yeah.
yeah, there are.
Well, so then the nature of the sign. So a yard sign is defined as temporary. I'm throwing this out there. And would the residual category just be non-commercial, decorative non-commercial? I don't know.
Does
Yeah.
profit, not for profit purpose, something like that?
We consider them non-commercial, I would think, because they, you know, it's a message that's, I don't know, a better definition than non-commercial.
I agree with that. To me, commercial, non-commercial is like almost a term of art that nobody's gonna. I mean, people might be confused about it, but I don't think, you know, code compliance people or judges, or I don't think anybody's gonna be confused about what non-commercial means.
Can we just add it as a definition?
Which,
Non-commercial, what do we mean by that?
it's in there.
Non-commercial practice.
Non-commercial speech? I'm gonna read it again? No, I'm just kidding.
That's the one you read. Is
That's the one I
Oh,
read,
that's-
yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay, sounds.
So it's messages not classified
the feedback.
as commercial speech. Messages concerning political, religious, social, ideological, public service, and informational topics.
So like in my mind, Vacation Bible School, that's an informational topic about something
Right.
a church is doing.
Right,
So we should allow it.
right. So what are we allowing, where are we gonna go with sizing then?
I'm leaning toward if it's decorative / non-commercial, that we maybe just exempt it, don't deal with the size.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Size or quantity, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if we're going to separate out something like a yard sign and call it temporary, then we either need to be enforcing the time limits on that, or I don't know how to.
Do you even separate it out, or do you just not even deal with it?
Maybe just don't deal with it?
I'd say don't deal with it. 'Cause it's gonna go away anyways.
Sometimes they don't go away. I just know of a house in our neighborhood that's had those yard signs in the front yard. Years, same signs have been sitting there. They
Like-
popped up
like,
popped up for
support the
election,
blue
and they've
line,
been there ever since.
election, their election sign.
It's not, they don't have a candidate name on it. They've got a
It's a
Issue.
message. It's a
It's-
political
yeah,
message.
political issue type of a thing, but, you know, they went up and they've been up for years.
Then we get into free speech issues, though, don't we?
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
Because we talked about that,
That and
you
the
know,
enforceability, because if you say this yard sign is temporary, you can only have it up for 30 days, then when we try to enforce that, are we gonna run into the free speech issue?
I guess my other concern is what happens if party A's neighbor, person B has an issue with A, so then we enforce it here, but then across town, nobody's neighbor over here is complaining, and so it's not getting enforced there. I think there's some slippery slope to that. Legally, could there be?
It's a disparate
So,
treatment.
well, so one person
It depends
speeds
on
and
what
gets
the
pulled over and
speech
the other
is,
person
yeah.
doesn't, you know?
Right.
It could come down to what the sign says, like if
Right,
you're
that's my
enforcing
concern.
certain things.
Uh-huh, that's my concern.
Yeah.
Or it's perceived as we're,
But
I mean, I don't know, I don't want to get into a situation where people are even perceiving we're trying to stop free speech. I don't know that that's good for the city's PR either.
And then there are certain areas where there is a homeowners association that says no signs,
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter what the message is, there
Yeah.
just aren't any.
but they bought that land knowing that they signed off on those covenants, and so at that point, that becomes their problem.
Right.
Because they all had them before they bought that property, and if they wanted to pay that money for that land and build their house there, that's on them.
Okay, so we're gonna start running out of time. I'm gonna just propose on 10 on exemptions, just say non-commercial signs when permanently or seasonally installed in residential districts,
I like it. Does anyone else not like it?
or some variation of that, you know, whatever.
When permanently or seasonally installed at a residence?
Yeah, R1, R2, whatever the district, you know.
In residential districts.
It's just a suggestion, and then I think we'd have a new one that talks about yard signs. Because again, this whole exemption thing just says the following signs shall not require a permit. So I think yard signs may be subject to a temporary, what we're talking about yard signs being temporary.
Yep.
May be subject to a size limitation, but then you still wouldn't need a permit, would be
Right.
Right,
the idea.
right, okay, yep.
So these two
So
things
can we
become
like
2
that
points.
there? And then on the chart, getting back to Claire's chart, are we just getting rid of, for that, this is the non-commercial, we're gonna have no size exemption on the size for non-commercial? On the chart, is that where we're landing? Yep,
I would-
okay, so then that one, the chart there goes no restriction. Hold on, I'm behind. And then when it says the sign may be illuminated, yes, as long as it doesn't interfere or doesn't shine light outside of that residential property?
Is the chart just meant to be a summary of of the other provisions here? The chart, no?
The chart is,
Gonna go in.
these are the provisions.
So it's an exhibit
I
of
would
the
say
ordinance.
no illuminations.
No
I would keep it
illumination?
as
Okay.
No illumination,
Okay, no
residential.
illumination.
So I got a little neon Viking sign.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be good.
Can't light up.
Oh, on the side of your
Is that
building.
a thing?
I got a neighbor that's got a workshop in his backyard that has like a Chevy sign illuminated on there. Just a little neon thing. He's got an old gas station sign that's lit up at night. Looks cool. I mean, it's
So-
all in good taste. I don't know why we want
So
to
does that,
restrict this anymore.
does it even need to be on this chart?
This is what was already in our code.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, but can we just get rid of the non-commercial line item in this chart if they're exempt? Why don't we just get rid of that whole section of this chart?
It's exempt from permitting though. So I think the chart still functions
Oh,
as
I
a
see what
summary
you're
of
saying. Yeah.
what's allowed.
Yes.
Okay.
That is
So non-commercial use, we're gonna get rid of the size on the chart.
Come on in. Are you here for the golf board? Yeah, this is planning commission. We're gonna finish up before you guys start, but you're welcome to come in. Or not, it's up to you.
Run fast.
What time do they start? Is it 7:30?
I've never been that early. for a
Mark,
meeting
did
in
you
my
want to
life.
present still tonight? On splits?
No.
No?
No, we're not doing that tonight.
You think seven?
No, we're gonna get this one done.
Are you sure, Mark? No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
No, what we decided is we're gonna, talking with staff, we're gonna get this one completely done before we go into
Okay.
splits, just so we don't,
I must have missed that in an email or something.
so, okay, so, what are we doing for size? No size there, and what are we doing with illumination? Well, there's verbiage somewhere in this thing that says already, for commercial signs, it says the illumination cannot
Yeah, you're
interfere
not
with
supposed
yada
to see
yada,
it from, like, a
yes.
residential area.
Can we just put that language in here too?
Yeah,
Sure.
sounds great.
Okay. Okay, so let's do that. We'll use that same language for illumination in residential, non-commercial signs.
Illumination.
Clara, I think there's just something in here that talks about illumination of something, and we
Yeah.
can just use
I
that.
think I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I'll find it.
So then, going back to this chart, what are we doing with these temporary signs?
So in my mind, temporary signs and yard signs were becoming synonymous. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But that's what my brain was doing.
Well, I believe the last half excluding freestandings were those black signs
Right.
where you would,
Yeah.
Because, yeah, those are just, I feel like those are too big for residential zones.
So we're not allowing the black signs in residential zones. So like the Just for Kicks one that lands in a yard every year would be a problem.
I would say yes, not realizing that that actually happens. Those are very large signs to put
They
in
are
a
very large
residential
signs.
district.
I'm not opposed to not having them allowed. We just need to know that they have gotten used on residential yacht lots, and we need to decide if we're good or not good with that.
Can those receive a conditional use permit? Like, can we get an exception on those, right?
It's an expensive exception. It's $350 for them to come in and say they want to put a sign up for 30 days.
Ouch.
That would probably make it not happen. Okay, I see Nate.
I find it a bit absurd that you can park your camper in your driveway, but you can't have a temporary sign there for 30 days.
technically the camper would have to be on the side of your garage.
Well, that's
if it
true
was
too,
paved,
but,
Or backyard.
yeah.
So what if we just say temporary signs and not exclude the freestanding ones and just limit their time frame and not get into the whole size thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I would prefer to go with it, but I'm not the only one on the planning commission here. So,
What are you nodding, Matt, at agreeing with that?
I'd agree with that.
Not dealing with size,
Yeah.
okay?
So can we make,
How do others feel? Oh, go ahead, Claire.
can I make this temporary and non-commercial signs then, since they're essentially gonna have the same enforceable information?
Except if we put as long as we're not putting a size situation in there.
Which it sounds like we're not, right?
I don't know, we've had two people say that, I don't know if everybody
Okay.
else is of the same mindset. How are people feeling about that?
I'm fine with that.
Does anyone want to
So
restrict
any
size?
size, any size?
And maybe we just need to have, so like, in our fence ordinance information, it talks about, so if you're on a corner lot, there's a certain part of your yard that you cannot have a fence over 3 feet on because of the sight lines for people who are driving in either direction. So if we can keep sight lines open and include that similar language there, that probably keeps us fairly safe.
Okay, let's come back with that language next time. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so then do we feel like we knocked this chart out? Okay. Did everyone read the computation methods and did it make sense? I think that was very helpful information that you sent in. So thank you. Do we have any questions or Claire, do you want to say anything on the computation?
Nope, I like the new language.
Okay. Are we fine with where window signage ended up, or where do we want to go with window signage? Right now, we're not restricting the size. One thing that I did mention to you was, once it was not current information, it needed to be removed.
Yes, window signs.
Like if the business had gone out of, if it's no longer an insurance company or whatever, then clear your windows off.
How long of a time frame do they have to do that?
I don't know, that's literally, it just was something that you and I had chatted about.
Yeah. Could be any kind of time frame you want. Probably 30 days makes sense.
Yeah.
30 days.
Along that same, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say 30 days sounds great.
Along the same window lines, so one of the questions that we've been thinking about as staff is, do window signs, since we've never really addressed them before, we've always kind of just taken them as they are. Does the window signage count toward the overall square footage of the signage on the front of a building or the side of a building? No?
I would say no.
I would say no.
Yeah.
That was an easy conversation, thank you.
Okay, are there any other thoughts or questions on window signage? Go
I
ahead.
was asked to mention that there ought to be some limit on how much of a percentage you might cover.
To me, if they're done
Thinking that there should
tastefully,
be
is it the
some
end of the
open-
world?
You know, so that it can't be 100% covered with whatever. I think there are places where it
It is
makes
100%,
sense,
yeah.
where you want it all covered, where there's a privacy issue, there's an attorney's office, a medical clinic, whatever it might be. There are other places where it's a simple retail place, and it's overkill. And so, how do you do that? It's a tough one.
We had some discussions about this last time, because I'm gonna guess the person who suggested that to you was here in the audience during that meeting. And I think part of the conversation was about, well, the stuff that's covering the windows, is it always even considered a sign, or is it simply screening? And if it's screening, we don't really have anything to say about that. They can screen their windows should they choose to. If it's signage, we could restrict the size of it, but the conversation that we've had thus far is that this group is not interested in restricting the percentage of a window that's allowed to be covered with a sign in particular.
I just look at some of like the insurance companies and like the new eyeglasses place on, what is that, Mill or whatever that road is. I mean, it's tasteful. I mean, some of the other ones can be a lot, but I don't know that it, to me, it's an economical way for someone to be able to market their business, and we need businesses to survive.
As long as they're maintained as well.
Right.
Yeah. So I brought up the point because I was asked to. I'm not taking a position that it should be open more or less. I think that, as you said, the decor is probably a good thing. But the one point I would make is the definition saying must be on, or shall be on the inside of the window, that's no good.
Oh, those signs can be applied on the outside.
That kind of vinyl is almost always on the outside.
Oh,
Really?
Almost,
know.
without
People can't-
exception, it's on the outside.
okay,
Okay.
okay,
The glare from the glass makes anything applied to the inside of the window really hard to see.
okay. I don't think any of us knew that when
No.
it was put in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
almost always on the outside of the window. That's just how it works.
You're talking like the view-through sign, where you,
The perforated vinyl, where you
You
can see
can't-
out from the inside, but you can't see in from the inside, from the outside unless the lights
Yep.
are on.
that's, I agree 100%.
That's the most common place where you would see this, what you're talking about. But even the normal things that say the hours of the business, open from 8 to 5, that's always on the outside. Yeah.
So we're not restricting? Is that where we landed?
Not restricting, and it doesn't have to be on the inside of the window, but we will add, it should be current information. They have if, you know, if a tenant vacates, they have 30 days to remove that signage. And we will put language in there that says that window signage does not count toward the overall square footage allowed.
Window and door.
Window and door.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
is it clear enough here that they also don't need to come get a permit every time that they're putting window signage?
So in my place, if they changed,
You add a lawyer, you add a doctor, you add a whatever, you don't wanna go get a permit.
Right.
So I would just say permits are not, I mean, can we just call out permits aren't required?
Sounds like it's exempt, actually.
It does kind of sound like we're exempting it, so maybe we don't even have a separate section for
Well, I think we need to
signage?
have it for the whole, remove it if it's 30 days,
Okay, yeah, true.
because that'll keep it updated at least. Okay, so the next page, that illumination section is the section I was referring to for the chart for residential. External illumination for signs shall be constructed and maintained and the source of the light is not visible from public right-of-way or residential property. So that's what I was proposing inserting in that sign chart.
Okay.
Good?
Like it.
Okay, heights. Would like to include height in other table sections. Okay, Claire,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
So, right now, height is its own section. I don't think it needs to be. I think it can be rolled in with all of the other districts. We just include the height information with each district rather than having it as a separate standalone. That was my whole thought.
Okay. Okay, this non-commercial speech. Well, this is kind of getting into that other stuff. 154, 186, or 185? You had a comment there.
Sorry, I'm just getting that in there. Okay.
I think we already,
I think we did, so as long as we get that, so everyone's on the same page.
Oh, I might have added another comment here today. Does this language, and I'm kind of looking for maybe an attorney to be reading this and telling me, is this language that we have here restricting non-commercial language to only be up during election cycles?
that's how I read it initially.
Okay,
That's how I read it initially. I was confused.
because we can do that. It's just all of our other discussions. So this is language that obviously came from Hopkins. So I think that's what they do there is you're not allowed to have any other non-commercial language out unless it's an election cycle,
Which isn't what we're trying to
which
accomplish.
isn't what we're trying to do.
Right.
So I think we need to either ditch this section completely or change it in some way.
To me, the election law stuff is all that's federal stuff. We can't touch that, right?
I think it's
Or state.
state.
So then, if it's state statute, do we have to call it out?
Probably not.
Can we
Oh, I
just,
think the statute just governs on its own.
so then can we just ditch this altogether?
Yeah, I think we modified the definition of non-commercial speech already in the other provisions.
Yeah. And just lose this section?
Yeah, I don't think we need it, because we're not restricting it by size either.
And I don't think we have to repeat state statute. You know what I mean? To me,
Right. Yep, it's Minnesota statute section 211B.045.
I'd say we lose it. Anyone opposed to that?
Okay, great. We added some language here on page 12 that just said, okay, so G is no sign shall be permitted to obstruct any window, door, or fire escape. Obviously, that will be excluding window signage. And then I think we can get into the other tables maybe the next time we meet.
The only thing I was thinking we should touch on is the lumens or how we were dealing with the
Oh,
brightness.
yep. Okay. So, in talking with our code enforcement officer, it turns out foot candles is still an acceptable way. She has a foot candle reader. So we had removed the foot candle language because we're like, who has a foot candle reader? We do. But you can also do the knits. So essentially, where we ended up with that discussion is that there is state language about the illumination and about how you can measure it that I thought might just be the easiest to fall back on.
Scott, can we ask your opinion on this as someone that sells signs?
The NITS is something nobody understands. And I've talked to a lot of people asking for definition and methods. So anything to do with NITS, I would avoid if I were you. Because
So going back to foot candles is okay.
foot candles would be preferred. If you're gonna have a definition and try to enforce something, I would say that's preferred.
So the state has some language about illumination of signs in state statute, and I didn't write down which it was, but it doesn't dive into how to measure, or is it the state? No, it was the language that you sent me earlier today from just that model ordinance that the company had put together. That didn't dive into measuring the illumination at all. It just said that electronic message centers must have some mechanism to react to ambient light and change based on that light.
And I think that's the appropriate thing. You're looking for them to dim at night automatically. And as long as the signs are automatically adjusting to the ambient light, and I think that's good. Having the ability to measure the light and actually enforcing it, it falls into that whole category. No one's gonna do it. You know, it's just,
On that point, though, we have had, so when we have electronic message centers that are abutting residential zones, we have had complaints come in that they're too bright, and our code enforcement officer has gone out there with her thing at dusk to check and see what happens. And if it's above a certain level, she has told them that they need to lower it. So it does,
So she has
Serve
had
some
to enforce
purpose.
some. I mean, there
She
have
has
been
had to
some that have
enforce
been
it.
had to do.
right,
yeah.
then that's great.
So the state, okay.
But, yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't see that it says NITS in there anymore, so that's great.
Nope, it's foot candles. And this is from 2022, so it's fairly updated.
I would say that makes more sense.
Okay.
Okay. And then are we touching on temporary and seasonal signs at all, or are we gonna not?
So we really didn't make any
Or the
changes
event
there.
ones, the event signage. You have some red in that.
Just back to 188, is the use of the CUP being issued by the planning commission intentional?
Yes, what do you mean?
Isn't it issued by city council?
It goes through planning commission on to city council. We can clarify that in there, if that helps. But yeah, it usually starts with planning commission.
Are we actually issuing the CUP? I think it's the city, I think we want to
It's the
use city
city,
council
yeah,
in that,
it's the
in that
city.
context. Okay,
I think we could just say through the CUP process of the city.
yeah.
Okay, we really need to get out of here, but, okay, so when we get on page 16 of this packet, we have this temporary and seasonal and community event signage with a couple of comments. To me, this is going back to this community event stuff. Why are we limiting those sizes if we're not limiting, the residential? I mean, to me, the size needs to go away, maybe.
Okay,
Am I right?
that was just me based on old conversations, so.
What is the zoning administrator determining, I guess? In two? Just if it's not limited to, basically? So basically if it's in line with those things?
Yeah,
Okay.
if it counts as a
Okay.
temporary sign.
What's a hanging metal sign?
I don't know.
Yeah, could be a
I truly
decoration.
don't know.
You know what that is?
We can remove it.
It had to come from somewhere, like it had to be in something that we were using and copying and pasting, I would assume.
Hopkins. I don't know, maybe they got a roaring trade in hanging metal signs.
I guess the other thing I was thinking was, I think that those, I don't know, those arms that stick up, maybe they should be listed, there. Like the, I don't know what they're called, they're on a pole? Like a banner, like a vertical banner?
The ones that are
Well, not maybe not the moving, not the dancing ones, but that was really funny.
Flailing inflatable tube man?
I missed that, can you show that again?
But like it's like a
Can you show that again?
planning commission has gone
Yeah.
downhill
I like that.
when the staff is dancing. The ones that are just like a vertical, like almost like an L, but they just have like that one banner that goes vertically on them.
oh.
The
Open
it's like a
I think
stick.
we would,
Open
I think we
house.
still call those a banner, right?
Is that still a banner? Okay.
It's owned by
that's-
banner companies. We call them feathers.
Yeah, that, yes. To me, that would be, I don't know if that has to be listed out separately, but that could be one of the types allowed.
Okay.
Feathers, they kind of look like a feather. That makes sense. Okay, any other thoughts on this section for anybody?
Yeah, under guidelines,
Okay,
there shall be up to seven sign placements. Is
do we really care?
seven, okay. Well,
don't
we
know.
do when it comes to little yard signs. You can only have one.
Well, no, up to 7 times per year.
Is
It's
that
not
what
7
that means?
signs. Yeah, it's so up to 7 times in a year you can have this in your yard,
Okay.
right?
Well, I mean, I'm an attorney. I read that to mean you can put, you can have a sign in 7
I get what
spots.
you're saying.
But which one is it supposed to be? Is it time frame or is it?
That's what I do. Oh.
I think it's supposed to be referencing, like, if you get a temporary sign permit, you could put up 7 signs throughout the year.
You could have 7 permits in one permit.
It would
You can
be
do it
one
7
permit,
times.
but you could do 7 different signs. So you could have, okay, I'm gonna keep using Vacation Bible School because that's in my head. You could have 7 different weeks of Vacation Bible School. You could get 1 permit, and you would still be able to put up. You'd have a different sign for each week, but 1 permit.
So,
And so-
our temporary permit isn't meaning consecutive days that equal, whether it be, whatever it was, 3 months or 1 month, 4 months or 1
It
month.
depends. Well,
You can space,
it depends.
you can space it out, is what we're saying. I don't know if that's what we want.
You can space it out over the year.
Yeah, because
Period of no more than 120 days, yeah.
okay, I have to think about this. Because you don't have that ability to space it out if you're putting your sign in one of the parks that's allowed. You only get the specific time allowed to you.
You're a lot, yes, in like Triangle Park or whatever.
Well, and then the question is, if we're allowing seasonal signage to be essentially falling under the same thing, are we then saying you can have up to 7 seasons? No.
So, and I guess my other question on the whole permit thing for this is, so let's say a church takes out a sign permit. They're gonna be asked what that sign's gonna say. But do they have to get one for each different event, or do they just have a sign permit that applies to them as an entity for their 7 different events throughout the year?
I guess I'm not exactly sure what that process is, because it always goes through Lynn.
But do you know what I mean? Like, to me, like, you don't want to get a permit for VBS and then 2 weeks later get a permit because you're having like a harvest dinner, and 2
Right.
weeks later get a permit because you're having a Christmas dinner. You know what I mean? In December. Like, to me, you can't get a permit every time the banner changes.
Right.
But I don't know that that's what we're saying.
I think that is the intention of what it's saying.
Right. I agree with you. I just don't know if that's how it reads.
So how do we want this to read?
And I think you have a point with A too. I don't think it reads the way we're intending it.
What does A
Annual
mean?
permit for the sign.
What does it mean? You know what I mean?
You mean 7A?
Yeah,
I think that's what we're talking about.
I know.
Should we just?
What is it
remove
supposed to mean? Like, what did you think it meant before?
7 different events, 7 different events during the year.
The way that I would read it, but then if I look up and read under 6, it doesn't make sense. But the way that I would read it is an entity gets a sign permit, they can put up 7 signs throughout the year. But reading 6, I don't know that that's true because it says permit required. You cannot place a sign without first obtaining an annual permit for the sign, not the entity, for
Right,
the sign.
But I'm wondering if we should have entity ability to get a permit, because okay, let's just go back to your VBS thing. Let's say they wanted, some church, OLV wants to do VBS, and they have 5 yards identified, they want to put a banner in. Do they have to come get 5 separate permits? Or can they say, we have, you know what I mean? Because they've identified 5 yards, they want to put a banner in.
Yep.
How does that work? Because I think that's pretty typical. I think for the VBS signs that are up right now, I've seen 3.
We issue them a punch card.
Right. But like, I'm just thinking like, this is supposed to be for community events. These community event organizers are gonna wanna hit, Lincoln or Union or over by the high school. We're not touching on that piece of this. And maybe we need to think on this and come back to this section when we have a little more time and process some of these conversation pieces. But I think we need to think about it and how it's gonna interface with the user.
Is it a permit for the event? Is that how
Well,
that
that's what
works?
and do we wanna permit it? I mean, you start questioning that
I
process.
believe this was originally,
For Triangle Park.
I don't know if it was Triangle Park, but there are people that have rummage sales every weekend at the same residence. So I think being here forever, that's my intent, what I remember being discussed.
Okay. And I think we're looking at it from a wider community base at this point.
Right, this doesn't have anything to do with rummage sales.
Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing.
So I mean, that's, I believe that
We always
number
have a
came
rummage sale on our-
from
Right,
that.
that 7 times came from that. But I wonder, Claire, if we just need to go back to the drawing board and look at this from the community event piece of things versus starting with rummage sale language maybe?
Yeah, I'll get with Lynn on this section of it and see, like, how she's interpreting this in practice and then what our actual intent is.
Right, and then how we can make it more user-friendly for these nonprofits.
Yep.
Okay. Scott?
Well, I had a few things that I would add
Okay.
to some of this, that if you've got some time yet.
We're here until they all push us out.
Okay.
We were supposed to have a meeting in here at 7 o'clock.
7:30.
We were supposed to.
I was told 7:30.
Okay, I'll go tell
Okay.
We want their opinion, tell them to come join.
Yeah,
If-
tell them to come in and comment on this.
all right. The .177 size,
Okay, where are you at?
I think it's page 8, but I'm not sure if that's correct. Page 154.177 size. No sign shall exceed 250 square feet in area. Probably a dozen signs that I could list in town that are bigger than 250 square feet.
Okay, as a sign guy, what is a reasonable number?
I think that depends on the zoning, and that's where the tide of zoning probably has to come in. In certain areas,
And that 250 though would be more like a B6. So matter of fact, Walmart is gonna be redoing all their, they're gonna be renovating their store next year. So I'm in the process of just issuing them a building permit. So obviously the main Walmart and the trademark cannot be over 250 square feet.
according to this. But I think it already is. And if you look, for example, at the Cenex sign, Comfort Inn sign, Shopko sign that used to be, those are all bigger than 250 square feet. So we have already existing signs that are bigger than that. But if a certain zone, like Walmart or whatever, wants to be 400 square feet, 600 square feet, you could give it a different number. But for downtown, you're not gonna want a 600 square foot sign, on Dandelion and Burdock. I mean, that.
Would
so
you be
it's a zoning
willing,
thing.
would you be willing, knowing kind of the rough sizes in town, to work with Clara before our next meeting on what some sizes would be appropriate for different zoning?
I think, yeah, and we can probably talk.
Or
to-
both of
but
you,
that's
yeah,
been
yeah.
typical.
I mean, is that a fair way of looking at
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Because I think we should probably try to, a new business coming to town should, if it's not obtrusive in my mind, be able to kind of match what their neighbors have.
Yeah. It's just having a blanket statement of no more than 250 doesn't cover the different zones.
Okay.
And so, sure, I'll work with you on that.
Okay.
Is that what our current ordinance says, as a general application is 250? Because we had talked about how we wanted to keep what our current ordinance says, but this
That was
doesn't
more
look.
for the, that's more for the B6.
And
For
what
like
this
the
would
downtown
end up
district?
happening is then they get a place like Shopko, then they have to go through a variance process to get something bigger. So it isn't that it could not happen, but according to the code, it doesn't happen automatically.
Okay.
And then they end up having to jump through
Right.
hoops.
And spend money.
So,
I think the other thing we had talked about is if it was required by corporate, like, corporate requirements, having some exclusions there or some process for conditional use or something. Probably getting the verbiage in there for that.
right.
Yeah, so we were basing that on some of the conversations we were having with Walmart, who's gonna be updating their signage.
Right.
However, they actually are fitting within our code at this point, so we weren't sure if we wanted to continue down that path or not, but if there are other signs in town that are greater than this amount, then I think we should
Well,
look.
it sounds like we have a lot of them
Yeah.
that are bigger than 250.
Yeah, well, Fleet Farm, that front of that building, that's gotta be 500 square feet, that big sign. So, I mean, there's some,
Probably true.
there's some big ones out there. And they probably went through a variance at the time that they were built, you know.
Or they just got signed off on and nobody, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, no one's gonna tell Fleet Farm they couldn't put a sign on the building, but there was probably a process that it went through,
we've all lived here long enough.
so.
Okay, so that's
um,
good.
But there's a lot of ties between this and zoning. 1792, there's, under, this is page 9, unauthorized signs, all off-premises signs. Apparently that's regarding billboards, because that's what a typical off-premise sign definition is. An off-premise sign would be something like a billboard. Well, we have
So-
some of those.
But Claire, you talked about inserting a section on billboards that we'll talk about next time?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't considering billboards as off-premise signs necessarily, but like as their own thing. But what we could do is just say all off-premise signs excluding billboards.
I think that would answer this question.
Everyone okay with that? Okay,
Because, for example, the Mortensen one over by the U-Haul place on Sheridan, that's an off-premise sign technically, but it's a billboard also.
okay.
All right. On the EMCs, we could look at that, dot 188, page 13,
Which page?
13, I think. One of the efforts here to try and avoid distraction is to try and limit or control how the images are displayed. And so number 5 has at least 6 seconds at a time. And for a large billboard size sign, 6 seconds at a time probably makes sense. But if you take a small EMC, like the one on the museum, 6 seconds is just ridiculously stupid. It just, it is impractical, and you wouldn't want to enforce that. You would basically tell them they can't use it. It would just become impossible to use, because it's only displaying a handful of words at a time, and you can't even get them, there's no way you could do it with a 6 second limit there.
So do you have a recommendation?
Or do we just
I'd-
remove it?
Yeah, you either would have to not specify a time, and just leave that out. Say, we're not gonna try and control how long the messages are up there. And just allow the verbiage that's already in there about things like flashing and blinking to cover you for that distraction question. Or you define it per size. You know, anything under so many square feet has to be this seconds, anything greater than that has to be this many seconds. I mean, you could do it that way and make it practical and
To me,
enforceable, but
I guess-
otherwise it's not.
I think that would be, personally, like, from my bedroom, I can see how much gas is and what changes at Holiday gas station. And I think if that was flashing or changing too much, I mean, there are people that are, and right across the street from like where Edward Jones used to be, it's Farmer State Bank now. I mean, I know there are residential areas that people were not happy these things were added right across the street. And so to me, just to be respectful of some of that, maybe the smaller and the larger.
And maybe there's something to do even with the zoning on this, because again, the one out by the museum, if you take a look at that one, that message changes this quickly. You'll have 4 slides in 2 seconds, and it's fine. Out there, nobody cares.
Right.
The one at Holiday, if that one was clicking that fast,
Yeah,
it would drive you nuts.
yeah.
Because it's a slower speed limit and it's a different setting. And yet, square footage wise, those 2 signs are pretty close.
Mhm.
The Holiday one's a little taller and shorter, the museum one's narrower and longer. So to try and define it by square footage, you know, you'd end up getting.
Or within 1,000 feet of a residential area, or 500 or whatever, something.
Yeah.
I think there
Maybe
was some
that would be
language
right.
of
And so again,
400.
it ties to zoning a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've got some concerns about that time, and maybe we need to, you know, talk about that some more. And then in the line 12, where it describes use of color that shall not create a distraction or hazard, blah, blah, blah. Trying to tell them you can use these colors and you can't use those colors, other than, you know, the red and blue flashing of emergency vehicles, which has already been covered. That just gets really, I don't know how you'd, it gets
Where
very
is that?
subjective, how that would be defined.
Number 12 on page 13.
There's one person's distraction is another person's art. You know, that's kind of the art of it.
Right.
And so whether it's distracting or not, that's a tough thing to define. You can have the speed of the changes and whether it's, you know, imitating a rotation or something like that.
I'm fine removing that.
So that there's maybe something to change there. And there was in the let's see, what was that? Page 7. There's something called a sandwich sign. Where did I see that? Maybe not.
That would have been like what the steel wheel would put
Oh,
out.
okay, so 15, that has this sentence, no temporary sign may be placed on a public way except by permission from the city.
Page 15, sorry, where are you at?
Page 15, at the H, letter H.
H.
H, okay.
So it's 189,
Yeah.
7H. Except by permission from the city, sandwich type or sidewalk signs may be placed. So here's, you've got this question about getting permission from the city.
Right.
And I thought, you really want to do that? Okay, then have a permit.
Yeah.
It just seems odd that you would ask for permission and not have some paperwork to go with it. So that just seems like a weird deal. to
What's
ask
being
for.
done with like the Cali sign and those like right now?
I think kind of the way that we've been looking at those, and again, this is Lynn's purview, is during the pandemic, we sort of removed all of our restrictions and we said, if you need to have a sign out that says you do pickup, whatever, like we just sort of let it happen. And I think we've kind of just continued down that same path. If it's infringing on people's ability to maneuver on the sidewalk, like if we run into ADA issues, we'll tell them to move it.
Then why don't we just change this and they don't have to get permission even? And as long as it's not hazardous or infringing, we allow it up to a certain size and not even, we just let it happen. I mean, let's minimize some of the requirements in my mind.
I don't think that we find a lot of complaints about the sandwich type sign.
No.
If you want it, and I think they're defined as less than 6 square feet, you know, so that's already in there. So
Does
it's not-
anyone want permissions associated with that or are we fine letting that happen?
Maybe what we say just to cover is that it cannot impede on people's ability to pass.
I think that's fair. I mean, I don't think the businesses would want that anyway for their customers. So I think that's fine. We agreeable with that? Okay. Claire, are you good with that?
Yep.
Those were the highlights for me.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay. We got a lot of mad golfers out there, so is there anything else anyone wants to talk about? Claire, do you
Lynn
have-
told me 7:30. I don't know.
I
They
think we're
didn't
good.
talk to me about it.
Keep looking through that door.
Maybe they
Is there any
haven't
staff
really all done.
updates? Is that
Yeah,
the last
staff
thing?
updates is the last thing?
No, just that I think we do have to have a meeting on the 28th
Yeah.
to do the CUP. And continue this conversation.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, we're always in.
Okay, we can all go this way and Claire goes that way?
Sorry how long, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, when you said that at the beginning, you just,
Yeah, I was like, we're not
Jinxed
gonna
us,
be here
I
till
think.
7:30.
And for what it's
I
worth, I really
did
appreciate the
it.
work you guys are doing on this, because this is not easy stuff.
Thank you for your
Nobody
insight.
enjoys it, you know, so this